Hi, I'm Nikki from Nicky's Little Stitches. Today I'm going to show you how to make the shoulder bag from my kit. So this is my kit, and this kit includes everything you need to make the shoulder bag and the coin purse, which is it's usually one of the first projects we do in class. It's just about straight lines and turning corners, and it's a fairly good project for a beginner. All right, for this project, you'll need the kit. You'll need a ruler, a marker or tailor's chalk, fabric scissors, which are just scissors that you use only for fabric and not on paper, a chopstick or a pencil, some pins, and I just have a couple of stones here to use as pattern weights. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is cut out my pattern pieces. So I've ironed on my pattern piece. I just put it close to the edge so that it's less cutting. I don't have to cut along that edge. And then I can save leftover pieces for another project. So I just ironed that on. I put the shiny side against the fabric and ironed it on. And now I can just cut around that. And I already did it with the other piece. All right, now that I have those pieces cut out, I need to decide which one I'm going to use for the outside. So I think this one I'll use for the outside of the bag. So I have to fuse my interfacing to it. So that just means I iron them together so that they stick together. One side of the interfacing is smooth and the other one is sort of bumpy. So you put the bumpy side against the wrong side of the fabric. Just put those together and then iron them until they stick. And this will make the fabric, it'll just make it a bit thicker, a bit more body. So rather than using a heavier fabric for the bag, you can just put the interfacing in it. Okay. All right, so that's fused together. I'm also going to iron it into the approximate shape, that I expect this to be. Just like that, so that I know how much of the flap I can decorate. Okay. So that is now has this, so I know that this part I can decorate. So I don't want to put anything around the edge, because when I sew this together, these edges will disappear into the seam allowance. It's safer if I want to put fabric, if I just put lines of it. But I think I'll do a mustache. So I'm going to cut that out and hand sew it on. So I'll do that now. All right, so I think that I will make a mustache. So how did this go? Okay, so this is my flap. So make sure I just sew it onto the flap. And I don't want to sew anything around the edges because this will disappear into the seam allowance. So if I fold that in half, maybe pin it to keep it there. And then I'll draw a mustache. sort of a twirly one. Then I'll cut that out. All right, that's a mustache. And then I think I'll use the black thread as a contrast to sew it on. Now this thread has 6 threads to it. It's made up of 6 threads wound together, so I'll divide it out into 3s because I don't want to use all 6 threads. It's a little bit thick for this project. It'll make it easier to thread the needle as well if I divide it up like this. So the one that I'm not using, I'm going to twirl around my fingers to keep it neat, ready to use next time. So I've got my thread, my needle. I'll just thread that. Okay, I'm going to put a pin into the mustache. And then I'm going to do a tailor's knot, which is kind of a nice big knot. So I'll lay down my needle and take the other end and make a circle out of it and lay the end against the eye of the needle there. And hold those two together. And then with your other hand, just wrap the thread around the needle 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold that between your finger and your thumb and just slide it down the needle and off the end. Now, I like to hold on to the thread so that it doesn't accidentally come unthreaded. And then I just pull, and that just makes a nice knot there. And then I'll just make sure my knot starts on the underside. Make this look nice. All right, when I get to the end, I'm just going to thread that back under a few stitches. right. All right, now I'm going to start putting the bag together. So I've got the outside piece and the lining piece. So I put them right sides touching. So this is the right side of the lining. And I want them to touch so that I've got the wrong sides on the outside. So there's the interfacing on the bottom. Okay, now this is my flap. So remember that. I'm going to draw a sewing line around. So I have to leave an opening for turning it right side out. So I'm going to, because the flap is at this end, I'm going to do the opening down this end. All right, so now I have to sew along the line. So you start to do a little back stitch, little locking stitch, and then sew along here, turn, 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 up here, and when you get to this line, do a little back stitch, little locking stitch. Okay, do that and I'll be right back. All right, so when I've finished, it looks like this. And then I'm going to just cut the corners like this. And it's just so that when I turn it right side out, I don't have so much bulk. I'm very careful not to cut through the stitching, because if I cut through the stitching, then I'm going to have a hole in the corner. And I'll have to go back and fix that. So not through the stitching. And all of these little bits that I have left over, I hold on to all of those and to use for stuffing later for another project. So then, once I've got that far, then I have to turn it right side out. So I like to, this close edge, I like to poke that through first. Now make sure that you're going through the two pieces of fabric and not pulling the interfacing off like I was there. Okay, and just poke the whole thing through. That. Okay. Then okay, I'm going to take my chopstick, which is always so handy, and I'm going to use it to poke out those corners. You don't want to poke really hard. You don't want to make a hole in the corner. Just gently. Because we cut all the fabric off the corner, the extra fabric off the corner, that helps us get much squarer corners. All right, so this end, obviously the chopstick won't go that far. Just ruche the fabric up over the chopstick. Okay, And that's basically my bag. So now I'm just going to iron that nice and flat. Don't iron over the felt because felt has plastic in it and it'll stick to your iron. So when you want to do that part, just turn it over. And then I'll move on to the strap. All right, so this is the bag. Ironing it makes a big difference in the way it looks. So I just ironed it so back into place again so that I know how much is flap. So I'll put that aside, and then I've got the pieces for the strap. So that's already sewn into one long piece. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to iron it in half lengthwise, right sides together. And then I'll take strips of interfacing and lay them along the fold and fuse them onto it. So I'll do that now. All right, so I fused the interfacing on. It looks nice and neat like this. So this is the open side. The interfacing is fused against the fold. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew just inside the edge of the interfacing, just to keep the interfacing on, because sometimes it can come off, especially with all with turning it inside, right side out and everything. So I'm just going to sew along here and just inside the interfacing the whole way down to the bottom, and then I'll leave this end open, so I'll back stitch here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll put, even though it looks so neat, just in case, I'll put a few pins in every so often, just so that it doesn't shift around while I'm sewing. And then I'll sew that up. All right, so I've sewn that. I kept my stitching to just inside the white, the interfacing, so it's just on the interfacing. And then I just back stitched here, so this end is open. So I'm just going to trim that bit off the end and the corner, and then I'm going to turn it right side out. Okay, so I'm just poking that end in. Now obviously I'll only be able to do that a little bit, and then I'll put it over a chopstick or a pen or anything like that and just work it down. There are gadgets for this, and I have gadgets, but all right, so I've ironed that, and then I put it across my body and decided where I wanted the bag to hit on my hip. So to decide the length that I wanted the strap to be. So I think this is long enough. So I'll cut it a little further down there. And then I'll poke the ends in and just give that a quick iron. All right, so it looks so much better when it's ironed. You know, for sewing you need a sewing machine and an iron. It really is something you can't do without. Okay, I'll iron that and then I'll start to get it pinned to the bag. All right, so this is the bag. Okay, so I want the straps to sew onto here. So the reason I haven't sewn the edges on is that if you're sewing this on and you sew it on here, then suddenly the top of the bag will be much smaller. So what we actually do is open it up at this stage and sew the straps on here, so they're just sewn to one side. So I will put it on there. Make sure that the strap isn't twisted. So one there and one there. I want it a little bit in from the edge so that it doesn't get in the way of sewing it together, sewing the sides together. And then I'm going to take a color that I can see. So this is black, so I'm going to use the pink tailor's chalk and just draw sort of a guide, a sewing guide. They're not the greatest lines, but it gives me an idea. And then, so it's a box with a cross in the middle. So you want to sew around the box, all four sides of the box, and then turn and go across the box and turn along the edge of the box and turn down. Now, it doesn't really matter whether you do this or whatever, just so long as you keep sewing and you have that X without cutting the thread. It just makes it stronger. And the same on the other side. And you want them to be, you know, about pretty much parallel. All right, so I'll do that and get back to you. All right, so I'm doing this in a different thread color so that you can see it. All right, so now I'm going to sew this together, hoping to show you how to do it. And I'm doing it with a white thread. Usually I would do it with a black thread so that it's not noticeable. I'm doing it with a white thread so that you can see it on the camera. So, okay, I'm set to a straight stitch and off we go. So down here, I get to the corner and then I'll turn it. The fabric isn't in the way of the camera. Take that pin out. Turn again. So that's my box. And then I turn and do my X. I go in the box again. And the last side of my X. And I'll do a little back stitch there, just to make sure. Bring my goose head to the top. And break my thread. All right, so now I have, I need to trim my threads. But now I have, the strap is attached. So I can fold the bag up, just for the two sides. And put a pin in it, holding that together. So that's going to be what the final thing will look like. And then we'll just sew down here and down here. So you go back stitch down to the end, back stitch, and back stitch down to the end and back stitch. And then it'll be finished. So I'll do that now. All right, so that's sewn together. The original opening, I think it was over here, the original opening where we turned the bag inside out. So that doesn't show anymore. And this is your finished bag.